Welcome everyone to our council meeting this evening. As the meeting chair, I give my consent for this open council meeting to be streamed live, recorded and published online. Anyone who is invited to read out a question or a presentation will be recorded, and their voice, image and comments will form part of the live stream and recording. The Chair and or the CEO have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory or potentially inappropriate to be published. The stream will stop prior to the closed section of the meeting and will recommence for the conclusion of the meeting. The public is able to view this live stream via our website at www.pyrenees.vic.gov.au. Should technical issues prevent the continuation of the stream, a recording will be made available on our website. I now ask everyone to stand please for our opening prayer. Heavenly Father, we ask you give your blessing to this council, direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the Pyrenees Shire. Amen. We acknowledge the people, past and present, of the Wadawurrung, Jabwurrung and the Watchabolik tribe, whose land forms the Pyrenees Shire. We pay our respect to the customs, traditions and stewardship of the land by the elders and people of these tribes on whose land we meet today. Thank you. You may be seated. First of all, I'll ask for any apologies, and there being none, I'll now move on to the notice of disclosures of interest by councillors and officers. Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Madam Mayor, I have a disclosure for item 13.0, which is the community grants. I have an interest in those, so I'll take the chamber for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. We'll give you that time. And now we will move on to the confirmation of the previous minutes held on the 19th of May 2020 and also the closed meeting that was held on the same evening. May I have a councillor move those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Easton, and seconded Councillor Ferrari. And any comments on those before we move them? I'll ask now those all in favour to move those minutes, and they are moved. Thank you. That brings us to item number 8, which is business arising, and I will take that as already read, which moves us to item 9, which is the public participation. And the public were able to send in or ring through questions prior to the meeting this evening, and we have received 10 questions, and I will now work through those. Our first one is from Mr. Lloyd Gollop from Avoca. His 2 questions are as follows. After the September public meeting held in Avoca, re the streetscape plan and the suggested amendments put forward at that meeting, may I ask why each business and or occupier in the zone were not personally contacted for their input and suggestions before council adopted the revised plan? Mr. Gollop's second question is, can I ask why council did not gather support from the public in regard to the suggested speed reduction in High Street Avoca to 50 kilometres per hour, and also the construction of a roundabout at the crossroads of the Pyrenees and Sunraysia highways to give further momentum to the cause? May I please direct now to Mr. Gowans to address those first 2 questions, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Gollop, for the opportunity to answer the questions. In relation to your first question regarding following the public meeting in Avoca about the streetscape plan, it's worth noting that 2 things. This particular issue, there is a report coming to council tonight for council to consider priority elements of the concept plan. But it's also worth noting that the plan was exhibited for 7 months in 2019, and quite a number of opportunities were provided to the community and were advertised. And during that period, Council received over 130 comments. And the adopted plan retained the single lane and made some minor changes by individual businesses. However, Council did review its original support of the single lane, and at its November meeting did support moving to the community position where 2 lanes were retained in each direction. However, as you will see in the report tonight, Council did commit to the outstand and tree elements of the plan at the time. In relation to your second question, regarding whether the speed reduction in High Street to 50 kilometres wasn't supported by the public, it's fair to state that a petition was presented to Council to address road safety, and that petition directly was asking Council to consider a lower speed limit. And Council, in its recommendation at the time, did support a lower speed limit. Council asked RRB to reduce the speed limit to 50 kilometres an hour, and RRB confirmed that 50 kilometre an hour speed limit was appropriate for Avoca, but a reduction should be accompanied by a suitably modified road environment to influence road user expectation, promote driver behaviour and enhance compliance from drivers. Council adopted the streetscape plan in response to this. RRB also stated that a roundabout was unlikely under current funding programs, and it's fair to note that the Pyrenees Highway is not under Council's control. However, Council did adopt a position to advocate for an intersection treatment at this location.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Our second set of questions are from Mr. John Quinn from Avoca. His first question is, after September town meeting, why didn't Council get back to Avoca community with amended plan, libraries shut and not too many computer literate? His second question, council officers, consultants only had to look at Rutherford Street behind IGA or Liebig Street to see how trees planted on the footpath verge give shade, present no problems to traffic and need no maintenance. Again, I will hand to Mr. Gowans, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Quinn, for your questions. In relation to your first questions, as previously stated, the adopted plan retained 2 lanes and made some minor changes requested by individual businesses. Further consultation was judged unnecessary as no further changes were made. The plan has received wide publicity through official channels in the newspaper and through community discussion. In relation to your second question, Liebig and Rutherford Street primarily service residential dwellings and local traffic. There are no commercial verandas and limited service lines can service equipment such as gas and Telstra lines. Trees close to the road may prevent access for larger vehicles. The effect on Rutherford Street trees on driver behaviour is similar to streetscape plan intention, in that trees in the trafficable area help provide a lower speed environment.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans, for that response. Our third set of questions are from Mr. Carl Manker on behalf of Lynn Mather, again from District Avoca. First question is, why is Shire Council adopting parts of the streetscape plan that the residents do not value as important? For example, outstands and parking space changes. The second question, how has the Shire Council selected the sequence for the rollout of the streetscape plan and the associated funding applications? And may I call again on Mr. Gowans, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for this question. Council, as we said, Council adopted the streetscape plan in February, and we've also stated the plan was exhibited for 7 months last year. The outstands and parking reconfiguration in the adopted plan had not been raised previously as a significant issue. Council committed to no net loss of parking spaces. Planting trees and installing outstands will enhance existing good quality streetscape environment, reducing speeds and increase road safety for all. This approach is best practice when it comes to urban design. It's best practice for road engineering, and it would encourage tourist traffic to stop and spend time and money in town's businesses. In relation to the rollout sequence, the report presented to Council tonight will put forward how to prioritise the funding available to Council for this project. However, the amount available would only be a very small start to the works that could occur in Avoca. And the priority works would need to have a positive impact.
Thank you again, Mr. Gowans. Our next public question is from Mr. Alan Murphy, again from Avoca. And his question is, outstands proposed in the new streetscaping Avoca. What mitigation measures are being put into place to manage tree roots, in particular the eastern side of the Sunraysia Highway, on top of stormwater drains that have already been problematic? May I again please call on Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Ms Murphy, for this question. Investigations that have been carried out on the underground infrastructure were predominantly to help Council determine where exactly and what depth underground infrastructure was at. And this would also help us go to these authorities to determine how far away tree planting could be from the existing infrastructure. The tree species have been discussed with the Road Authority, Regional Roads Victoria, and it's essential to ensure that there's no impact from root balls on any underground infrastructure, whether that be councils or third-party infrastructure. And there will be provision, and there is in our concept plan design to ensure that there's root barriers where necessary.
Thank you again. Our final set of questions this evening are from Ms. Joanne Beavis, again from Avoca. Her first question is, why have the cafes in the other two blocks been given 6 car parks for large vehicles out front of their business, but my bakery has been denied this massive advantage when it has the same space out front, but instead you have decided to reduce my parking by 2 spots for trees? Her second question, why are you putting in trees on the road in my street when within 1 metre of the marked tree on the road is an area that once was where 2 trees grew on the footpath that has been removed or died? Thank you again, Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Ms Beavis, for your question. Officers continue to engage with the business owner. All trees shown on the adopted plan are concept plan and are subject to further decisions, and that, as stated earlier, will be one of the issues in the report tonight. It's possible for trees of specific concern to business owners to be sited elsewhere and subject to being identified by officers. Formalising car park in the median will provide additional car parks at the end of Avoca. And it's also worth noting again that Regional Roads Victoria is the land manager for the highway. In relation to the second question, look, I'm unfamiliar with the specific trees that were there previously, but thank you for bringing that to our attention. The intention for tree planting is to increase green space, reduce vehicle speeds and enhance the streetscape environment. And it's for those reasons that Council considered the concept plans, and the council officers are still working with individually affected businesses to determine reasonable outcomes at each location.
Thank you very much, and thank you. We thank the public for those questions this evening. That now brings us to item 10 through to 12, which are the items for noting. I will take those as read. However, there is one I would like to bring the public's attention and people's attention to, and that was part of our Reconciliation Action Plan, the inclusion of Watchabolik community, and you would have noticed that we acknowledge them in our acknowledgement to country at the start of the meeting. So that's an exciting addition, and just wanted to bring your attention to that item. That now, may I ask a councillor please to move those items for noting, or any questions on those?
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Seconded, Councillor Clark. Anyone wanted to comment or question anything in those? I'll put those to the vote then. All those in favour, and then move. Thank you. That brings us to item 13.1, which is the planning permit application for PA 2946/20. And I will now hand over to Ms. Katie Gleisner, please, to speak to this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. An application has been received by Council for a planning permit to allow the development of a single dwelling at Lot 2, Golf Course Lane within Beaufort. The lot that is subject to this application has been zoned rural living and is not subject to any overlays. A permit is required under the zone given the proposed dwelling is within 100 metres of a waterway, and the distance from the proposed dwelling is less than 100 metres from a dwelling not in the same ownership. All surrounding lots are zoned rural living, with the exception of the golf course, the bowls club and the croquet club, which is located to the northeast and zoned for special use. As per Council's normal and legislative practices, notice was sent to 8 adjoining landowners and also public notice was provided through Council's website. In response to the 8 notices that went to adjoining landowners, 2 objections were received, or 2 submissions, and I'll go on to discuss those submissions and the response from the assessing officers. So the first part of the first submission received gives regard to excess height of the building, as we believe it will greatly affect the views from our property as well as the views from our next door neighbour's property also. It's the assessing officer's opinion, and this is supported by recent VCAT decisions, that objections stating loss of views cannot be considered as there are no legal rights to a view, and that the availability of views must be considered in the light of what constitutes a reasonable sharing of these views. And it was on that ground that the assessing officer does not determine that submission to have substantial grounds. The second part relates to an expectation that the proposed dwelling is of 2 stories. We have received confirmation that the proposed dwelling is a single story building only. The third part of the submission states that the style and design of the home is ultra-modern and does not blend with the environment. The officer's response is that the application is supported by a schedule of proposed colours and materials, which are described as being recycled red brick, cement sheeting, corrugated steel, timber cladding, timber decking, both of natural colour, concrete of a natural appearance, corten steel with a rusted appearance, and PVC framed windows. It is considered that the selection of colours and materials are sympathetic to the rural environment, with the colour palette taking cues from the surrounding and rural areas. The style and design, whilst different to that of the surrounding properties, is respectful in its bulk and form by not being of an inappropriate size or dominating the skyline. Further, the site is not subject to any heritage or built form overlays, which limits council's ability to give consideration to such values. The first part of the second submission received claims that it may virtually obliterate my views, which are paramount to the virtue of my property. And I will refer to the response in the first part of the first submission, where it's been determined by VCAT that the views are not to be considered. The second part, the submission claims that the property owner will incur substantial devaluation of my property. And the officer's response is that in accordance with section 57 of the Planning and Environment Act, council may reject an objection which it considers has been made primarily to secure or maintain a direct or indirect commercial advantage for the objector. It's in this case that council has not given consideration to property devaluation in the assessment of this application. And the last element of the second submission received states that as my recent purchase of my property was made on the attributes of the property in its present environment and no mention had been made of any such approval consideration made, I consider both unfair and unreasonable that approval for such a building in its present format should proceed. And again, it's the officer's assessment that the site is zoned for rural living, which provides for residential use in a rural environment. The assessing officer does not support claims that this application is unfair and unreasonable, particularly when the underlying zone permits the proposed use. The objections made against the application have been considered, and whilst the majority of grounds were made on planning grounds and in line with the Pyrenees planning scheme, they are not considered to provide us a sufficient basis to refuse the application of this kind. And as such, it's the officer's conclusion that the application meets the requirements of the Pyrenees planning scheme, and we've therefore made the following recommendation: that council, having considered all matters required under section 60 of the Planning and Environment Act and the provisions of the Pyrenees planning scheme, determined to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit under the provisions of the Pyrenees planning scheme for the development of a single dwelling on lot 2, plan of subdivision 814588X, volume 11975, folio 102, Golf Course Lane, Beaufort, subject to a set of conditions that are outlined in the report. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Gleisner, and going through those other notes and references to the application. So may I have a councillor happy to move that recommendation as it is? Thank you, Councillor Ferrari, seconded Councillor Easton. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Ferrari?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank the officers for their detailed submission, which always assists in the decision-making process. We did have an on-site inspection. All councillors and some officers went up there today to give us a visual perspective, and I think that's really, really important in the decision-making process. And after that inspection, I concur with the officers' recommendations to grant the permit.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to that? Other councillors, would you like to make comments? Yes, Councillor.
Just to add to Councillor Ferrari's comments, it's a very pleasing area to the eye. It's a really lovely little place, and another modern house to meet the modern houses around it seems eminently sensible. I think we have due process to follow today, and that's what we're doing. But yeah, it seems like a very logical thing and a really nice addition to the open area.
Thank you. Any comments? If there are no more, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, and that's carried. Thank you. That brings us to item 13.2, which is the tree outstands priorities for the Activate Avoca project, and I will hand over to Mr. Douglas Gowans, please, to speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek council support for priority components of the streetscape plan for Avoca to be undertaken as part of the Activate Avoca funding, with a specific focus on tree outstands and safe crossing points. The Avoca Streetscape project was developed as an outcome of the Pyrenees Future Strategic Planning project and focuses on incorporating community feedback into a place-based and strategic plan for development. Consultation for Pyrenees Futures began in December 2017, where the Avoca community sought a solution to the hazardous traffic conditions on High Street. Conditions were raised around traffic safety, a lack of shade and shelter, limited seating, footpath surface quality, and general amenity of the town centre. A draft streetscape plan was placed on public exhibition during 2019. Following extensive consultation, the community did not support a single lane treatment that was part of the proposal. And in the November 2019 council meeting, council resolved to continue to support amendments to the Avoca Streetscape Plan, amend the Avoca Streetscape Plan to reflect a retention of the current 2-lane in each direction carriageway configuration, support a draft plan that shows the Cambridge Street civic spine concept, safe crossing points, tree outstands in current curbing parking bays, a retention of parking within the median strip, the retention of the existing public toilet location, and a reviewed tree planting concept. In order to implement the tree outstands as indicated in the streetscape plan, council engaged a contractor to determine where underground infrastructure was located, including the exact location and depth of the gas pressure main. While undertaking this work, several community members raised concern about the specific location and quantity of proposed street trees and associated infrastructure. Council officers endeavoured to engage individuals who raised concerns and has been working with affected business and landowners to address concerns raised. A meeting was held with representatives of Advance Avoca on Monday the 25th of May, where they further raised concerns and expressed that some of the early communication requesting increased shade within the Avoca Streetscape had been interpreted in a way that was different to what some members of the community envisaged. Representatives of Advance Avoca suggested that shade improvements were intended to be focused on the replacement of the barbecue shelter to provide shade. Council is in receipt of funds to implement elements of the Avoca Streetscape Plan that will improve safety outcomes and support a lower speed limit. Council at its July 2019 meeting resolved to support a reduced speed limit on High Street and seek a formal response from Regional Roads Victoria regarding design condition requirements to support a reduced speed limit, pedestrian crossing points and outstands. Council subsequently wrote to Regional Roads Victoria and has since received a response in relation to the design considerations. Regional Roads Victoria response confirmed that it supports speed limit reductions in town centres due to the significant safety benefits to all road users, but the speed reductions should be accompanied by a suitably modified road environment to influence road user expectation, promote appropriate driver behaviour and enhance compliance from drivers. Regional Roads Victoria provided potential road modification options as being a reduction in traffic lanes and widths and the provision of curb outstands and pedestrian-friendly treatments. Regional Roads Victoria also confirmed that it's supportive of reviewing the Sunraysia and Pyrenees Highway intersection for possible improvements, but advised that a roundabout was unlikely to be funded under current funding programs. In order to implement Council's November 2019 resolution, some of the tree outstands need to be installed to support an improved road safety environment. The key elements that have been identified include the 8 outstands, 4 in each direction, that create safe crossing points at strategic locations along High Street. Officers recommend that these 8 outstands be prioritised for delivery. Any remaining funds from the Activate Avoca grant would be concentrated on addressing any existing infrastructure issues such as footpath defects, curb and channel defects, and linking the key crossing points through improved footpath networks. The Avoca Streetscape Plan will take multiple years and external grants to deliver. Council is in receipt of a $250,000 grant which will be used to deliver specific elements, including improvements to pedestrian infrastructure, the installation of street furniture and tree planting. The Avoca Streetscape Plan represents an opportunity to enhance Avoca's vitality and street scene aesthetic while improving road safety for all users. Prioritising safety improvements to pedestrians and supporting a lower speed limit will reflect feedback received from the community. And it's therefore the officer's recommendation that Council prioritise Activate Avoca funding towards safe crossing point outstands.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. So with that recommendation before us, do I have a councillor happy to move that? Councillor Eason, seconded. Councillor Clark. Councillor Eason, would you like to speak to that recommendation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This project has been ongoing for some time. One of the highlights of the project is the safety element to create a better safety environment within the town centre. I'm pleased to support this motion, which further enhances that safety element within the streetscape plan.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think just to reiterate the words of Mr. Gowans, that the concept, and it's good to see that in the questions that we've had, that the issue of 50 kilometres is still very much at the fore in terms of the people of Avoca. It's still very much at the fore in terms of this council's officers and councillors' minds, in the sense that we have to change the road user expectation. We have to do that in a physical sense. Hence the work that we've got proposed today. So I would fully support that. And I think again, I would encourage council officers to continue to work with the business owners. I'm sure we can negotiate solutions in individual places, and we should be continuing to do that. I think that's a great way forward in the sense it's our community. I'm sure we can do that, and I think we move on from there.
Thank you. Other councillors, would you like to speak? Would you like to speak? Councillor
Just for the benefit of my understanding, Mr. Gowans, could you tell me at this stage we're talking purely only on safe pedestrian crossings without stands at the pedestrian crossing? Trees down the track, is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Vance, through you, Madam Mayor. At this stage, the outstand areas will have the provision for a tree, and that's in 4 locations on each side. There are limitations for tree planting because of underground services, but the prioritisation of these 4 safe crossing points would include some vegetation planting associated with those crossings on the, if you think about the crossing point, the approaching traffic can't have a tree in front of it, but the traffic going away from it, so on the downstream side of the traffic lane could be considered for vegetation purposes.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor
Thank you.
Vance.
And further tree plantings will be considered after further discussion with business owners and residents in affected areas, yes?
Thank you for your further question. There is provision for some tree planting in the centre median where possible, which was part of the concept plan, but any further outstands at this time, as per the council resolution, aren't prioritised under this lot of funding, so therefore it's just these 4 outstands on each side are prioritised for this funding.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Gowans, addressing that and the previous public question. So I think some of that was captured in that as well. So with that before us, may I ask all those in favour of that recommendation? And that's carried. Thank you. That now brings us to item 13.3, which is an unused road licence and property access at Waterloo. And again, I'll ask Ms. Katie Gleisner to speak to that item. Thank you.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with information relevant to allowing further consideration of the matter of an unused road reserve that adjoins the northern boundaries of lots 1 and 2 on plan of subdivision PS 611079 in the parish of Raglan in the location of Waterloo. In February of 2015, the owner of Lot 1, which for your benefit is shown on the attached plans, wrote to Council requesting that this section of unused government road licence be cancelled to facilitate access to their property. At this time, the property was subject to a range of building and planning enforcement action, and it was Council's resolution to not give further consideration to the request for cancellation until such time as the non-compliance matters have been resolved. In May of 2017, Council was advised that the matters of non-compliance had been resolved following the issuing of a planning permit to authorise the use and development of a dwelling and ancillary buildings, and the removal of all building notices and building orders relevant to the property. Upon achieving compliance, the property owner again raised the matter of the unused road licence with Council, and it was listed at the August, September and October meetings of 2017. Council resolved on the 17th of October 2017 to not cancel the road licence on the following basis: that the property owner had access to their property via elimination track, and that the cancellation would cause a financial impost to the licensee by way of mandatory fencing and the removal of any improvements. The matter has also been raised with the Victorian Ombudsman and the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, who have provided opinions on the matter. More recently, in May of 2020, Council received correspondence from a solicitor acting on behalf of the owner of Lot 1, requesting that the unused road licence be cancelled in the public's interest. The solicitor's correspondence claims that the licensee's stock pose a hazard to road users whilst the road remains under licence for agricultural purposes. Elimination track has been discussed as an alternative means of access to the described property. However, given this track has not been surveyed, gazetted and proclaimed as government road, it cannot be considered a legal means of access. Despite being physically formed, elimination track remains state forest managed by DELP. The track is maintained by DELP to a standard suitable to their land management and operational needs, and is not at a standard that complies with access requirements associated with the dwelling. The planning permit that was issued in 2016 over Lot 1 to permit the use and development of a dwelling and associated outbuildings was conditioned with a range of access requirements. The requirements included expectations of the Country Fire Authority, given that this lot is subject to the Bushfire Management Overlay, and that is that access for firefighting purposes are facilitated. And further, the Pyrenees planning scheme requires that all dwellings within the Rural Conservation Zone, and more broadly within the Shire, are accessible via an all-weather access way with a minimum 4 metre width, and that was also conditioned on the planning report. Section 400 of the Land Act allows a municipal council to give notice that any road or part of a road which is within the municipal district of that municipal council and which it considers is not required for public traffic is an unused road. Council have previously declared that this section of road is not required for public traffic in accordance with Section 400 of the Land Act. Following this information, it's the conclusion of this officer's report that as the property owner has no authority to undertake works within the state forest to facilitate compliance with the above two planning permit conditions, it is not reasonable to require that access to the property be via elimination track. Further, due to this section of licensed road being the sole means of legal access to the described property and dwelling, and as such it is required for public traffic, it cannot be considered as an unused road in accordance with Section 400 of the Land Act. It is acknowledged that a cancellation of the described licence would require the current licensee to cease occupation. It is also noted that the Crown land tenures of this nature are subject to cancellation instances where the primary purpose of that land, in this case a road, prevails over any secondary uses, and that they have been permitted via a non-exclusive fixed-term licence. The risk of cancellation is clearly reflected in the licence agreement between the landowner and the tenant, and like with all tenures, there is a risk of ongoing security to all parties involved. Should Council resolve to cancel the licence, the licensee will be provided with 90 days to cease occupation of the government road. In the instance where the stock are capable of accessing the road, it would be reasonable to expect that a stock-proof fence be erected in accordance with the requirements of the Land Act. The fence that may be required is estimated to be 540 metres in length. Due to it being a straight span and adjoining a single large paddock, the requirements for gates and end assembly infrastructure is minimal. It is on that basis that the officer recommends that Council determines that the described section of unused government road is required for public traffic, and resolves to inform the Minister that the described section of government road licence should be cancelled in accordance with Section 407, subclause 1 of the Land Act 1958.
Thank you, Ms. Gleisner. With that recommendation before us, may I ask the councillor to move that? We'd be happy to move that. Thank you, Councillor Clark, and seconded Councillor Ferrari. And Councillor Clark, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It really, as I stand up and say that this gives me no pleasure to deal with this item, but tonight it does give me no pleasure because in our life we have things that are legal and we have things that are right. And unfortunately this one is legal, but I wouldn't necessarily be saying that it's right. Council's held a view now for several years that we would like two landholders to cooperate and work together for some mutual benefit. However, one party obviously sees that differently, and recognising that they know their rights, that is why we're in the position we're in today. I don't think we have any choice but to support this recommendation because it is what the law says. But it's a real shame that another landholder who's doing nothing wrong by allowing access anytime that's needed and has just got a few sheep on there is going to be put to the expense of at least a couple of $1,000 to put a new fence up, plus their time and labour. I'm really disappointed, but it is the reality of the decision we have to make, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a question in relation to that from the officer. How long is the section of road and who will be responsible for the maintenance of this road?
Thank you, Councillor. The entire length from the Chute Waterloo Road, which is currently on Council's road register, to the start of the subject property is just over 1 kilometre in length. However, the section that is subject to the licence is 540 metres. It is Council's practice that should an access way be required to facilitate access to just one residential property, that the maintenance costs and associated development of that infrastructure be borne by the single landowner. And in this case, it is certainly the case that that single landowner would be required to upgrade and maintain that section of road at their expense in accordance with Council's infrastructure design manual.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Councillor Vance.
Just a further question. The applicant to have the licence cancelled, is he a permanent resident on that particular piece of land or is it just a holiday home?
Thank you, Councillor. It's my understanding that the licensee who adjoins the road licence is a resident of that property, does reside at the property adjoining the licence.
Further comments or questions? This one is a tricky one again, and it's one of those ones that we very bound legally, which can be very frustrating too. But I do ask all the councillors now to vote on that recommendation. All those in favour? All those against? And would you like that to be acknowledged? Yep. And that still passes that recommendation. So thank you, and thank you, Ms. Glasner, for all that information and answering those questions. That brings us to item 13.4, which is our Audit and Risk Committee meeting, establishment and charter. And now I will call on Ms. Cathy Bramwell, please, to speak to that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to gain council approval to re-establish its Audit and Risk Committee and approve a draft Audit and Risk Committee charter. Although Council has a long-established Audit and Risk Committee, Section 54(7) of the Local Government Act 2020 obliges all Victorian councils to re-establish their Audit and Risk Committees and approve an Audit and Risk Committee charter on or before the 1st of September of this year. This requirement was tabled at Council's Audit and Risk Committee meeting on the 26th of May, and the committee put forward recommendations to Council that Council approve the revised Audit and Risk Committee Charter 2020, that the Pyrenees Shire Council re-establishes its Audit and Risk Committee in accordance with Local Government Act in the same format and structure as existing, as this meets obligations under the new Act, and that the Pyrenees Shire Council should continue the tenure of committee members in the same timeframes as originally implemented under the Local Government Act 1989. It should note that two of our Audit and Risk Committee members, their tenure ends early next year, and one of the members, the former chair, his tenure ends in August this year, and he has indicated that he will not re-nominate. The adoption of the Audit and Risk Committee Charter, A copy of the draft charter was provided under separate circulation to councillors, and it was revised to meet all obligations detailed in the Act, and the Audit and Risk Committee requested that Council resolves to accept the recommendations relating to the adoption of the Charter. The new Charter remains very similar to the document adopted in 2019, with a range of changes made to comply with the 2020 Act, which are detailed in the document, in the report. All of the provisions within the new Act remain similar to provisions already within the former Act, and the Audit and Risk Charter provisions therefore remain compliant. The recommendation is therefore that Council adopts a revised Audit and Risk Committee Charter 2020, establishes the Audit and Risk Committee to operate in accordance with the provisions detailed in the Audit and Risk Committee Charter, its composition and tenure to be as detailed in the recommendation report, I won't read all of that, and that the 3-year tenure schedule from the former Audit and Risk Committee established under the Local Government Act 1989 be carried forward to the new committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bramwell. With that recommendation before us, may I have a councillor willing to move that? Thank you, Councillor Ferrari, and seconded Councillor Vance. And just one change or one addition we may like to add is because of Mr. Jeff Pearce's Jeff Price's not going to renominate, whether or not you would like to make a change to write a letter of thanks for his commitment on that. Oh, good. Oh, perfect. You've read my mind, and you. But I'll hand over to you. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor?
I would, thank you, Madam Mayor. You've read my mind. Firstly, I sit on the committee with Councillor Eason as part of our portfolio. It is interesting, and we do cover a lot of ground in a short time, but it's very important stuff when we're dealing with risks and audits. Yes, I would like to thank Jeff Price for his commitment to the committee, including his time as the chair. He will be finishing in August, and I ask that we formally acknowledge his commitment to that committee in some form, preferably a letter of thanks or something from the council. I congratulate Wendy Honeyman as being elected to the chair, and I also look forward to working with Wendy and Rod Pox and the group in the coming year. And Wendy and Rod and Jeff are very, very thorough in their application of at the committee, and they don't leave any stone unturned, I assure you. So it's very pleasing to work with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Would you like to speak to
Yeah,
that?
I'd just like to add to Councillor Ferrari's comments, especially Jeff, who's been an excellent chairperson, and the role is vital to keep the checks and balances on the way we're functioning. So certainly a letter of thanks for his service to this council would be very fitting, I believe.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments that councillors would like to make? And again, I would like to say, having worked with Jeff as well, we were very fortunate to have him, and he'll be a loss, but we've got a great team moving forward, and Jane has added that as recommendation D, write a formal letter of thanks to Mr. Jeff Price for his time on the committee. So with that recommendation before us, I ask all those in favour to yes or carry. Thank you. Brilliant. You didn't want to make a good point. Sorry. Okay, so we're up to item 13.5, which is again the Audit and Risk Committee, and I'll hand again to Ms. Cathy Bramwell. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with an update of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 26th of May 2020. As required by Section 53(4) of the Act, the chairperson of the Audit and Risk Committee must be an independent member. At the meeting on the 26th of May 2020, in accordance with the annual schedule, Ms. Wendy Honeyman was elected as chairperson for the 2020-21 year. The meeting was attended by committee members, council officers, and council's internal and external auditors, after the internal auditors being AFS and Associates, and the external auditors Crowe Melbourne. It was a very large agenda this time, and a summary of the issues considered by the committee was listed for council's information. One item that was discussed and a recommendation has been passed on from the Audit and Risk Committee to Council is the current contract for the Internal Audit Services provision. The current contract for that service ends on the 30th of June 2020. The current contract with AFS and Associates of Bendigo was awarded in 2017 as a result of a tender process. An Annexure A of the current contract, item 11, allows for a further term to be awarded of 1 by 1 by 1 year options. It was felt by the Audit and Risk Committee that to maintain consistency of approach and building upon the organisational knowledge developed over the past 3 years by AFS and Associates, it is considered appropriate that the term extension option in the current contract be utilised to extend the contract by a further 12 months to the 30th of June 2021. And the Audit and Risk Committee recommended that Council extends that contract accordingly. The Officer's recommendation, therefore, is that Council notes the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 26th of May 2020 and the following documents that were listed for information, which listed in the recommendation. And number 2, accepts the recommendation from the Audit and Risk Committee and resolves to extend the current contract with the AFS and Associates for internal audit services by a further 12 months to the 30th of June 2021.
Thank you, Ms. Brenner. May I have a councillor move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Easton, and seconded Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Easton, did you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Audit Committee does a wonderful job in helping us stay on the straight and narrow, and the organisation that we have working with us at the moment, I support the move to extend the contract of AFS and Associates. They've done a wonderful job over the 3-year period of their current contract and would see them continuing that work.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ferrari, would you like to speak to it? Other councillors? No, we'll put that recommendation to the vote, and that's carried. Thank you. That brings us now to item 13.6, which is our rating strategy and the 2019 addendum, and I will again hand to Ms. Kathy Bramwell. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider altering the rating strategy 2019 in response to a rapid increase in valuations of farming properties in the Pyrenees Shire. The current rating strategy was adopted by Council at its January 2019 meeting, and the existing strategy explains how Council will determine what money will be raised from different types of properties within the municipality, whilst acknowledging the difficulties in linking property values to an assumption about the individual's ability to pay. Also, a draft budget was endorsed by Council for community consultation on the 14th of April 2020, and of course the draft budget includes the differentials based on the rating strategy for which rates will be paid, which feed into the budget. Feedback to the draft budget highlighted a significant shift in the rate burden from the residential sector to the farming sector. And in response to this feedback, councillors proposed deviating from the 2019 rating strategy. The current year is the second year of the 4-year strategy, but in the 2020 revaluation, the overall increase in valuation across all assessments was 15.2%, but rural properties experienced a sharp rise in valuation, approximately 23.8% in comparison to lesser areas. A revised rating strategy, draft rating strategy, has been developed with rating differentials adjusted to shift the burden of increased rates payable from the rural sector through a proposed 2020-21 addendum. And the report gives further details on what the proposed differential percentages are. So a new 2020-21 draft budget has been prepared in line with that. That will be discussed as part of a further report. I'd just like to say that the amendment of the differentials in the rating strategy is the only mechanism open to Council to address any imbalance caused by extreme variation in valuations. So the officer's recommendation, and this is a revision to the original, and it's already been given out to councillors, is that council endorses the draft 2020-21 addendum to the 2019 rating strategy for advertising, and that council give public notice of its preparation and invite public submissions to be received up until 5 p.m. 10th of July 2020, and releases the draft rating strategy for public exhibition on Wednesday 10th of June 2020, and agrees to hear any submissions in person or consider any submissions received at 4 p.m. on Tuesday 14th of July 2020 in Beaufort. However, under current COVID-19 arrangements, anyone wishing to make a personal presentation will be offered an invitation to do this via virtual means, and arrangements will be made for that by council staff. And at its ordinary meeting on Tuesday, the 21st of July 2020, resolves to adopt, with or without amendments, the rating strategy 2020-21 with addendum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bramwell. Thank you for that more detailed alternate recommendation. So with that recommendation in front of us, may I ask a councillor to move that? And thank you, Councillor Clarks. And a seconder, please. Do I have a seconder yet? Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. And I will now open the discussion. Would you like to speak first to that recommendation, Councillor Clark?
If I could just ask a couple of questions of Ms Bramwell first, or actually it's a bit more seeking confirmation. The addendum is very clear, and it is effectively for 1 year, Ms Bramwell, isn't it?
Yes, Councillor. Yes.
Thank you. The key, I think there's two key things in it that I just want to confirm that I have right. The first thing is that we've had a general uplift across the Shire, but the difference between our residential land, which has gone up 7%, and our rural land, which has gone up some 23%, is around 16.5%. So it's a really, really significant difference. That's correct as per the strategy, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. And the final one of the things that we try to do with the rating strategy, obviously, is to balance the effort between councils. One of the things that we've been very mindful of here is that one sector, and council can only work in averages, that one sector is not carrying any more of the load of the other. And with what council has proposed tonight versus what council was in the original budget, the actual amount that the rural ratepayers are paying actually is slightly more, and certainly not any less by the change that we're proposing, if I understand it correctly, Ms Brown?
Yes, that's right. The actual percentages is actually the amount of the percentage of the rate burden that's on
in aggregate, yes.
Rural sector would be very similar
Yep.
under the proposal.
Thank you. So with that, to understand why council is doing this, and this is the first time in my 20 years in council we've done this, so this is a special time, but it is that disparity, and rates are the only tool. Rates are a tool to share the burden in that sense, and this is about, as I see it as a councillor, sharing the burden and trying to balance who pays what in the sense of these things. That 16% difference is really significant in the context of what would happen to people's rates if we didn't do anything to modify this situation. And as I said, this is really about moderating it. With what council has proposed in the rating strategy, if it is adopted, and we have a month of consultation before that, 80% of our residential ratepayers will pay less than the 2% cap. 80%, so 8 out of 10, 4 out of 5. Our farms on the other hand, if we hadn't done anything, around 30% of them would have paid under 5%, but the other 70% would have paid over that cap. So as I said, what we've tried to do here is to moderate this. And just by a little bit of moving of the figures, we've brought that to closer to 50% of those farms will pay under 5% if this is adopted in that sense. Council's long-term view on this has been pretty clear. The rating strategy as it existed talked about council moving progressively back to 76%. What we're proposing tonight is to move to 74%, so it's really 2% beyond what council had already committed to, simply to try and make the system be a little bit fairer in this year and to share things equity in that sense of things. So I think it's a good strategy. We'll wait for the community consultation and we'll go from there. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Ferrari?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Certainly agree with what Councillor Park said, and just like to quickly add that Rating strategy is really the only tool available to council for us to try and even those things out. So we've had to visit that a couple of times due to a number of factors that are outside our control, but we will revisit it again and put it out to the community to try and get the best and most equitable rating percentages across the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Vance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The important thing for people to understand is that at the end of the day, the size of the pie doesn't alter. It's just the amount of portions that people have got to contribute. That's got to be understood. Because farmers have a walloping great increase on their rates, doesn't increase the amount of money that comes into council. So it's hard for people to understand. It took me many years to understand how the system works, but we don't have a bigger pie to work with. And the other thing that is important is that in doing this revision, we've responded to submissions that have come into us. We've had submissions presented on behalf of the farming community, and we've made the alteration with that in mind. There's still the opportunity for people to put further submissions in. We go out to the public so they have the opportunity to contribute their thoughts. If the commercial or the home owners feel that they're unfairly dealt with, tell us.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Vance. Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This change that we're proposing this evening basically was brought about by a submission to our rating strategy and the budget. And it shows that people who provide submissions are heard and listened to. In regards to Councillor Vance's comments, it is only one pie. It doesn't alter depending upon who pays what. But if one section doesn't pay somebody else has to make up the difference. So the movement within this submission and the movement within our recommendation tonight, some people gain, some people lose. It is therefore my suggestion that anyone interested in their rates should look at what change has come from this adjustment that we're proposing this evening and put in a submission if they are unhappy with what has occurred.
Thank you, Councillor Eason. Any further comments to that or responses? Oh, yes, thank you. Sorry, Ms. Brandon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to make one more point in that the addendum to the rating strategy is just for 1 year. Under the new Local Government Act, Council does have to develop a new revenue and rating plan before June of next year. So it is only for 1 year. I just wanted to make that clear to the Council.
Thank you very much, and I would like to thank the councillors for their responses, and this has taken a lot of time and a lot of deliberations and that to be able to come up with something that we can believe can be as equitable as possible across the board for all our ratepayers, and also acknowledging those submissions that we have received. Of course, with this recommendation, if this goes out again, if this is carried in a moment, this will go out again, and we do strongly encourage submissions and that from the public if that is the case, because that gives us more knowledge and it enables us to be able to come up with the best process and the best percentages that we can. So, in light of that, all those in favour of that alternate recommendation, and that is carried. Thank you very much, and thank you, Ms. Bramwell. That now brings us to item 13.7, which is the revised draft budget for 2020-21, and I will again hand to Ms. Kathy Bramwell to speak to that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider the revised draft budget for 2021 to provide approval to exhibit the revised document for further public consultation, and this report is related to the previous report. A draft budget was endorsed for public consultation by Council on the 14th of April 2020, and it was put out for 28 days in accordance with the Act. In response to the rapid increase of valuations in the farming sector in the 2021 revaluation, Council proposed a deviation from the 2019 rating strategy that was adopted by Council in January 2019. The increase in valuations of the rural sector was not known at the time of developing the original budget and at the time we went out of public consultation originally. The proposed alteration of rating differentials allows councils to shift the burden of increased rates payable from the rural sector to distribute it more evenly across all assessments. And the 2021 revised draft budget has been prepared in line with the revised rating strategy with the 2021 addendum. The budget still includes a total rate increase, the total pie, of 2%, which is the rate cap set by the Minister under the fair go rate system. The balance of the revised draft budget remains the same as the former draft budget, which has already been out of public consultation. So it is therefore recommended that Council endorses the 2021 revised draft budget for advertising, and that Council give public notice of its preparation and invite public submissions to be received up until 5 p.m. Friday the 10th of July 2020. That it releases a revised draft budget documents to the public on Wednesday the 10th of June. And we'll meet to hear any submissions in person or consider any submissions received at 4 p.m. on Tuesday the 14th of July 2020 in Beaufort. Again, under current COVID-19 arrangements, the public, anyone wishing to make a personal presentation will be encouraged to do that via electronic means, and we will facilitate those arrangements. And that is ordinary meeting on Tuesday, the 21st of July 2020, the Council resolves to adopt with or without amendments the 2019-20 budget. I would just like to make one more comment in that normally under the Local Government Act it would be a requirement that the budget is adopted by the end of June, but because of the COVID-19 restrictions that have been placed on businesses this year, the timeframe has been extended, so we won't be breaching the Local Government Act. Thank you.
Ms. Brumwell, just one thing, were you taking item 1 out? Or
Oh, sorry, yes, I removed item 1, which is the substantial of fees and charges.
So, thank you, Ms. Brumwell. We'll just take that out, and then now as the recommendation stands, may I ask a councillor happy to move that recommendation? And Councillor Eason, and a councillor to second that, please. Councillor Clark. Councillor Eason, would you like to speak to that?
No.
Councillor Clark, would you like to speak to that? Any other councillors' comments? In order of that, then we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried, isn't it, to the other one. Thank you very much, and thank you, Ms. Brumwell, for the preparation and all the other personnel involved in that. That brings us to item 13.8, which is the community grants allocation for round 2, 2019-20 financial year. And I will again hand also.
Excuse me, brother.
Yes. I'll just hold it on the moment. Oh, yes, sorry. For Councillor Clark. This declaration of conflict of interest. Now I can hand over to Ms. Cathy Bramwell. Thank you very much to speak to those grants allocation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider allocation for round 2 of the 2019-20 Community and Community Capital Grants programmes. Council provides grants to the community in recognition and support for work undertaken by community groups, services and organisations located or operating in the Shire. These grants are designed to enable the provision of activities and events which promote community activity, achievement, participation and well-being. In round 2 of the Community Grants Programme for 2019-20, round 2 of the grants programme was opened in March 2020. Following allocations in round 1, the following amounts are available for round 2. Community grants we had $53,940 and community capital grants $6,966 just over. 12 applications for community grants, including events, were received, and the list is in the report. And 11 applications for community capital grants were received. Again, the list is in the report. The total of community and events grants requested total of 13,767. It is recommended that all but 2 of those grants are provided, and except one of those grants, the Beaufort Municipal Band, they applied for $1,500, yes. But this was an event, so the maximum they can be granted is $750. So we've changed the recommendation to meet that. The community capital grants, 11 community grants were received. Unfortunately, the total of the grants applied for was just over $44,000, and as I did say, there was only just under $7,000 left for community capital grants. There is available, if the recommendations are accepted tonight, of the assignment of the money for the community grants, there will be $23,423 left. Grant applications for the community capital grants for approval, and that is the Central Grampians LLE